Namaste viewers, I am Ankur Pathak, co-founder of Garuda Prakashan, and today we are having our guest Dr. D.K. Hari and Dr. Hema Hariji.
Namaste.
So, welcome Dr. Hariji and Dr. Hema Hariji. And today we are going to discuss about their book, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Beacon for New India. So, I welcome both of you. So, let us begin. So, my first question is, the title of the book is Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the Beacon for New India. So, why do you think that Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a beacon for New India?
Good. So this is a very good question to start off with. When we are writing the book, we thought of different names as to how we can name the book. And what's happening is India as a land, as a civilization, now as an independent India, as a country, has been going through various phases. Between 1947, for the next 20 years, we called ourselves as Independent India because that was the name. Then we tried to give him the name Modern India. When we wanted to modernize, we had to try to give the name. And all this happened. And around 1915, 16, they were looking for a new name, which will sort of suit India well. And a group of people came up with the name called New India. 2015-16, they're coming up with a name to coin for the efforts being taken in India. So we came up with a book actually called Knowing New India. That was a book that we came up with, which was trying to look at and understand from a civilization perspective as to the transformation that's happening in this land at a people level, not just as governments. See, governments come and go every few years, both in the state and in the center. So that's a process that continuously happens. But there's a transformation happening at the people level. So we wanted to sort of record that. And it was happening more from a civilizational perspective. So we want to record that, and we wrote this book called Knowing New India. And as a prequel to that book of Knowing New India came this book of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Knowing New India, because when this book was shown to the Honorable Prime Minister of India, he much appreciated this book, and he said, all this is fine, but the person who laid the early steps for this was his mentor, the former Prime Minister of India, Bharat Ratna, Swargiya Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So sufficiently enough has not been documented about his role in this making of New India, because he was there much before the time even this term was coined. So he was actually a beacon, like a light. Beacon is a light. So he showed the disha for the New India from the earlier eras, because eras keep changing every 20, 30 years. So it's a New India era. So from that perspective, what is it he contributed? What was the transition that happened? And how is it that his ideals now happen to be the beacon for these decade and more? So to understand from that perspective, not from a political perspective at all, but more from a civilizational perspective. That's why we thought this term encompasses that whole perspective of beacon for New India. Actually, it was my wife, Hema, who came up with the term beacon for New India, and it was so apt. And it also went well with the whole idea that earlier we wrote a book 8-9 years back called U-Turn India, as to how each individual in India can effort to contribute to make India a better place. So U-Turn India, that was the book that we wrote in English and Hindi. That was followed up with Knowing New India, and now U-Turn, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a beacon for New India. So that way it's come out, panned out quite well, looking at 3 different perspectives and bringing out this idea of New India, how it is a part of the traditional India, but again looking at from the global perspectives and the needs of the times, how things change, the perspectives change, but your core values are same. That is the bedrock of our civilization. So the values are there, and from a global world, how we can look at it, that's what we're trying to bring out in this book, Beacon for New India.
Right. So very great insights. When I was reading your book, it's really very fantastic one from the writing perspective, as well as the content is awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So
writing about such a great leader.
Yes.
So it was a very big learning for us also.
Yes.
And I mean, the kind of facets that you get to see when you look at his life, and you know, the great achievements that he has managed in that life, and not for himself alone, but more for the country, and the kind of thought leadership he has brought in is commendable, and that's
Yes.
very inspiring.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So, in today's time, we see that there is very much infrastructural development everywhere, right? We see roads and buildings are growing in every part of India. But in your book, you mentioned that it was the vision of Atal Bihari Vajpayee for a better infrastructure, especially if you talk about the road connectivity. So please show some light on this.
Sure, we can do that, certainly. For example, if you look at after World War II, the big development that happened in the United States of America before and after that period was they're building those big roads covering east coast to west coast, north to south. Their whole national grid was built on which America really developed and grew. This was after the Great Depression. It happened in 1929. The next big investment as a people development was building the grand roads of India. The roads were so wide. I'm sorry, in America. So the roads were so wide in America that they could even land planes in the road. So that was the width and the length of the road. They built end-to-end roads. And that really took the United States of America to the next phase. Similarly, if you look at Germany, the other example, the big Western power. Again, between the world wars, what they decided was the way Germany, the German economy can develop was by good infrastructure and good roads, good connectivity. So they built the Autobahns. The famous Autobahns of Germany were built there. And they could move the army well. The World War II Hitler army, Nazi army could be moved around. And that was a big boost for them for the war. But it's stood 70 years after the war, and those roads, Autobahns, still serve the German economy well, and it's a robust economy. Similarly, anywhere, but if you look at India, roads has been a tradition of India. The Grand Trunk Road from Bengal to Punjab. Today it goes from Calcutta all the way up to Lahore. It's called the GT Road. It was built by Ashokan times, so much before that, and Sher Shah Suri again repaired the roads, and many people have done similarly, have done that. So that's been a lifeline in the north. Similarly, you have had the southern roads like that. That's called Uttarapada, you also got the Dakshinapada. Like that, you got different roads in different parts of India. So road building is an ethos of the land, and you have multiple roads. And Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee saw this opportunity as to how in other countries, other economies, road building was a big exercise, and it boosted the economy at a ground level. And how in India we also had this tradition, and he merged the two and came up with this beautiful idea of golden quadrilateral connecting the four ends of India, and he came up with that first idea. So that really picked up as an idea and developed today to build all these wonderful roads which we all use so happily.
Right.
And which have now, the traffic has outgrown even these roads.
In the last 20 years, as she says, true.
Right, right.
But, you know, Ankur, I actually want to draw your attention to something that's very beautiful, you know. He had actually focused on creating a network of roads, the golden quadrilateral. He had also thought of the scheme of, he had given trust to the interlinking of rivers as well. Many people before him have also spoken about it, and he dared to give more thrust to it. And he also worked on telecom, opening up telecom. So if you really look at it, you know, he has done Tripura. He is on the land, on water, and the sky.
Airwaves.
Right.
All three done.
So it's
Right.
amazing. You know, that is a very
Yes.
nice thing that one could see.
Yes, he was such a great visionary. So
Yes.
yeah. So as you talked about the development work in USA, so in today's time we see that we are having a very good relationship with United States of America. But if you see before 90s, means before 2000 specifically, if I talk about, so then those relationship between India and US were not that great, right? So how our former Prime Minister Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji molded a better relationship between India and America?
Good question. Because for this, we have to understand that in the earlier ministry that he was of Sri Morarji Desai, earlier in the previous governments, he was the External Affairs Minister then. So he had a first-hand understanding of how external affairs work. Even though his natural language was Hindi, his oratory was in Hindi, his poetry, his kavita was in Hindi, he understood the global dynamics quite well. And the one other thing about Atal Bihari Vajpayee as a person was, he was a consensus man. And he always, he did not push through only his idea, wherein he took in other people's ideas. And everywhere, if you look at all his processes, decisions, and the way he formulated policy was through a general consensus. That's how he could bring people up. And that's the same policy that helped him forge good relationship, as you correctly pointed out, with the United States of America, because before that we had very turbulent relationship. The earlier governments, and there you had a very strong Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs named Henry Kissinger and all those things. So it was a bit of a turbulent relationship, agreed. But the tide actually turned with Vajpayee, and since then we have successfully cemented it in a beautiful way to come much closer now. And now in New India, you're having a big, huge summit of Modi, Trump, both in Houston, Howdy Modi there, and here Namaste Trump, so all those things. So that it's now reached a level of being natural friends. So it's what we lost out in the first 30, 40 years of independence, we have to make up in the next 20 years. So he was the person who sort of shifted gears and changed the direction of perspective. True, yes, which is what you brought out in the book.
Right, right. And one most important thing I noticed that the activity from Indian diaspora has been increased, right? Just after the NDA one, or you can say the Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government. So means what was his vision related to or in regards of these NRIs in the growth of India?
You want to speak? Okay. See, you should understand one thing. After independence, India went through a big learning curve, education curve, and we had set up quite a few institutions. A lot of people studied well, youngsters. When the parents struggled to make ends meet, the next generation really worked hard, educated themselves well, and accomplished themselves not only within India, but in the Western world as well, be it in Europe or Americas, because Americas was easier because naturally English speaking. Because in India, the education system was English, and in Americas it was there. So they were able to quickly go and adapt there. And in lakhs, millions Indians went there and spread themselves. So it happened over a decade or say a couple of decades. Then when at the time of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, what he could do was he knew he had the sagacity to tap into it beautifully. And he started the Pravasi Bharati Divas, what is called as PBD, and it's become a flagship event of the Government of India, especially of the Ministry of External Affairs, the Pravasi Bharati. So every year we had an annual mega event. Now it's become every alternate year mega event. So this way you could tap into it. I'll take a simple example. All of us have been to schools and colleges. And after we finish schools and colleges, even though we are alumni of that school or college, it takes us some 5, 10, 15 years to ourselves to climb our professional ladder and come up to a certain level, both professionally as well as in society. Because only then we can start contributing back to our alma mater, be it a school or college, or be it the institution that prepared us for a professional life. So it requires, after you complete your graduation, say a decade or two or little more also, to be that level to look back, be confident and do something back. Similarly, when Indians, since independence, went overseas all over the world. And then they were also able to do well for 30, 40 years. And then they had reached a stage when they could look back and say, okay, this is where I came from. I can do something back for this land. So persons of Indian origin were able to look back and do something. So for that, when you had both some money in the pocket and some time on hand to look back and do it, what happened? Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee beautifully brought out a program called Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. And he created a formal platform where the ministries could interact with the people who have gone overseas for different times. And they can contribute back something for the land either they or their parents or grandparents came from. That was a beautiful way that he created a bridge, a setu that he could create.
So it was also an effort to give an anchor or a route for all these people who had gone out, not now alone, but even much earlier during colonial times, when they had to move out of India. They were taken as laborers to many parts of the world. So it was an opportunity, and they have made it big in those lands. Some have really risen very high up in the hierarchy of even administration in those lands. So it was a way for them to come back, connect with India again. And that was something very nice. And it opens the eyes of Indians as well. Not only to the fact that there are Indians spread all over the world, but also to the part of the Indian history which was not spoken of till that time. Not many were aware until this Pravasi Bharatiya and all the diaspora. Then you started wondering, oh my God, this part of history has really not been spoken about so much. So that was something very nice, the connect that he established.
Yes. So yeah, absolutely, because by connecting India's own population, he just digged on the treasure, right? Which was already available, but nobody was using that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to know, means every country can develop only when its population is well educated. So what was his vision related to the better education in India?
See, India's had a literacy problem for the last couple of 100 years. Because before the British came to India to take over and administer India, both politically and economically, India was a very well educated country. And Mahatma Gandhi himself has said in Chatham House that India was well educated till the British came and uprooted the education system of India. So his disciple Dharampalji wrote a nice book called The Beautiful Tree and say how it's been uprooted. Actually, we mentioned about it in our book, Breaking the Myths about society. 1/3 of the book is about education. You can show that. Yes. So that is, we've shown that there. That is the historical problem. Then after independence, we have had national education policy and how to, all those things, adult education, literacy, all that we have had different things. But everywhere it was reaching certain amount of roadblocks for different reasons, because India is a vast country and has just come out of shackles of colonial oppression for a couple of centuries. So what he brought out was something very interesting. He called it as Sarva Siksha Abhiyan, SSA. He brought it out and he showed it very nicely, diagrammatically, with a boy and a girl sitting on a pencil going to school, a long pencil, red and black pencil, because all of us use that pencil when we were in school. Yes. So he showed the pencil of going to school with a school bag and a boy and a girl sitting at each end of the pencil. So that sort of, he got the message through about Sarva Siksha. So the education for all. And he brought it out, and that effort took it to one more step, because there are multiple hurdles. Each person has to cross a hurdle. So in this step, he opened it up in a bigger way at the grassroots level to reach education to all. So that was a big step, certainly. And since then, in the Beti Padhao of the new New India, that's the Knowing New India, which has written one full chapter in the book, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, that's taken the next step again. Each where you sort of, this one more peak you climb, one more hurdle you climb through. That's an ongoing process we have to do.
Yes. Okay. And for any country to develop, it needs to be a corruption-free bureaucracy and society. So today we talk about the good governance, and we also celebrate for our former Prime Minister's birthday as a good governance day. So, what was his vision for this good governance?
See, like you said, corruption and clean, good governance, government which is clean, which is corruption free, only then can it really function freely. And not just function freely, he translated the thought of the kind of work that he had been doing all across his years as in the form of social service and social awareness, of reaching things to the last mile, people at the last mile. So that also got translated into the government's policies and the framework and the various schemes and things. This was also factored in. So it is not just only working clean, but also working to ensure that everybody is addressed, so that you envelop everybody in the governance. So that is what was his idea of good governance, and which has further in the New India era from 2014 has got a much more structured framework and infrastructure to enable that to happen. And we have been able to see the benefits of that in recent times as well, when literally everything has come to standstill, but some of these underlying things still really work.
Yes.
And we should also remember here very clearly that there was an earlier style of functioning which was very, very socialism, which was alien to India. It was not an Indian style at all. And that was sort of bearing us down. It was like the Atlas man holding a huge Atlas on his shoulder and being bent and being not understand. So that was a system that was alien to us, was bearing us down. Not only that, if you see, socialism has failed all over the world over the last century and wrecked economies across, be it in South America or anywhere in wherever it's been, it's generally wrecked the economies all over. There's no doubt about it. Over a 100-year period, so it's a failed philosophy imposed on India, and he had to shed it out. So that huge garb had to be shed out. So it's a process. Now we can, having now shed it, now we can look for other things, because that was something. And the last mile connectivity we speak about in management today, or be it in the software field also, there's something we call the last mile connectivity. So that was an issue then, and it had to be had to be sorted out. For that, he had laid the initial steps for it. That is what today we have to reach to this. So that's why we call him Beacon for New India. Because when you know there was something holding you back, you are driving your car in fourth gear, but with your handbrakes on, because your system was, the socialism was alien to you, imposed on you. So there are all these problems. So you have to manage them both and then bring it out. So that was a lot more difficult period, a turbulent period. Because transition has to be handled carefully. When you transition from anything from one to the other, it's always a period of handling, which is what he did with aplomb.
Right. So today we are seeing like India is planning to move on the Mars. There is Mars mission, Moon mission, and we are having a complete different kind of space policy. So what was his vision regarding the India's space policy? I remember on 15th August 2003, he announced the Chandrayaan-1. And you also mentioned about it in your book. So please share your views on this with our viewers.
See, Moon is there, and Moon has been there in all our fables and stories. And Moon is equated with love to everything. In all poetry, Moon is there. And Atal Bihari Vajpayee was a great poet. He was a romantic poet. His romance was with the land, not with a lady, but with the land itself. Okay? With Mahabharati. So that was what his romance was, with the people. So obviously, Moon has played a big part. Chandrama is part of our life. So, and right from 1960s, people have been wanting to go there. Different countries have been trying there. There was a race between the United States of America and Russia, where John F. Kennedy announced that by the end of the decade, they will land a man and bring him back successfully. So 1969, they have to do it with the Apollo missions. Then Russia tried it. Other countries have tried it successively. So India cannot be far behind in this, in the moon missions, because that's the frontier. Because if you have to go to space, which is the next big frontier from 2030, 2040, 2050 for Mangalyaan and beyond, you have to, moon has to be a first step. And that has to be, and you have to take that step forward. And you have to have a national policy for it. That is why he thought it fit to announce it from the ramparts of the Red Fort in his Independence Day speech and have it as a policy. So you have a name for it, you have a vision for it, and you have a national mission for it. So that is what he brought forth. So that is the policy that a prime minister can do. Then it's for the concerned departments to take up the job and do it. And India has been fortunate that we have had good space research organization, which is sort of in a way second to none. We've got excellent people who have done excellent job right through and brought pride to this land, having a good space mission. So we have had Chandrayaan 1, now we have Chandrayaan 2, then we're going to have many more Chandrayaans, Mangalyaan. So it's going to be, and now we are looking at Gaganyaan, being in space. So when you build a building, what do you look at? Who laid the foundation stone for the building?
Right.
In that way, Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee had announced the Chandrayaan mission, which was a big step forward. Of course, we have been to space before that, but in a Russian airship. Two of our Indian Air Force brave people, they had gone in this. Yeah, Rakesh Sharma and Ravish Malhotra were trained in the Soviet Union, then which was USSR, and then they went in the Soyuz spaceship. So it was there, and he made a wonderful statement from there. And when the then Prime Minister of India, Indira Gandhi, asked him that famous question, "How do you see India from space?" He said, "Sare jahan se acha." It's a very famous statement he made. So Indian had been to space, but we had been in somebody else's spaceship. Now we can make our own spaceships and go. That was a next big stepping stone.
Right.
When we were writing this book, one thing that came out very beautifully about our country as a whole is, we had all the problems and then we got our independence. But after that, even though we have had so much of political turmoil saying, okay, this party, that party, opposition, this and so on, underlying the functions of the various departments have gone on in an uninterrupted manner. And they have all been working, irrespective of who is the political leadership. I would say that is to some extent level of sagacity on the leadership that has been there throughout, and also the wisdom of the people in the various departments, in the bureaucracy and in the actual professions who have kept those things going. Like, for example, our space mission is a beautiful example. Like, all through, irrespective of that, I mean, once the the path we embarked on it, we have been going forward and really moving fast. And so these kind of things have happened beautifully, and we can see that aspect of India. The other aspect is also on the nuclear mission. So even in that story, you really get to see how, for us, as a common man, sometimes all the rhetorics of politics and election, you will really think, oh, there is total cutoff and a new party, a new leader, new change, and everything is, you feel that things are going to stop and something new is going to start. But there is actually the things that happen underneath. Those processes keep continuing irrespective of that, and the leaders make sure that that happens. If they hadn't made sure, then our country would have broken down long ago. So this is a beautiful aspect that comes across, and more so in the nuclear mission story. You really see that when the Pokhran 2 took place, because it happened fairly soon after Vajpayee ji came into power. And so it shows that a lot of things had happened much before him, and the kind of other aspects that he had to deal with. not necessarily the development of the technology, but the deployment of the technology and when to deploy, the decision to deploy. So there are two dimensions to things. One is, yes, you go ahead and do things technically, but then how do you, when do you deploy it wisely? So these two dilemmas, these two aspects also come out very nicely. And, in the book, we have actually spoken, we've given a very nice angle to this as to how he had the humility to also express this in public much later, after everything had happened and all that he had said. That part of it is actually very nice in the whole story of his life, and it's very, very interesting to see these kind of developments.
Right, right. Actually, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji was a man of simple living and very high thinking. His vision were very, very, very high. And if you see, during his tenure, he also took very brave and bold decisions as well. So whether it is the bifurcation of two states, which was done very smoothly during his tenure, and or if you talk about the atomic test, right? Despite all the sanctions and restrictions on India, he did not move, and he led the country with the same dignity and grace. So my first question to you is on the bifurcation of state. So how it was possible for him to, bifurcate these two states, whether it is Bihar and Jharkhand?
Uttarakhand also.
Yes, Uttarakhand also. Yeah, 3 states. So please show some light on this subject.
See, the fundamental factor you should remember is, after his time also, a couple of states have been bifurcated, but there's a lot of rancor.
Yes.
And a lot of bad blood. Whereas in his times, the states that he tried to bifurcate, actually he was not in power in those states, but still could. That's because, as I had earlier said, he was a man of consensus. He could bring people to the table, talk to them, listen to opinion, address their issues, and get across to them the larger point of India and administration, governance. So that was where the good governance, when you say why give good governance day to the birthday of Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, because these were the factors of governance, where you bring in a different mindset of people who necessarily don't belong to your political affiliation or even political perspectives, bring them to a table, talk to them, make them see a larger picture of a land that goes beyond politics or beyond just decades, and how to get it across to the last people, because the last mile, the last people, the antim person is very important. And that's been a philosophy that he has come up with, and he's read those philosophies of how it has to reach the last person. So that is the key philosophy. So that is what got him, because Uttar Pradesh, we all know, is a big state.
Yes.
And today it's there, but let's be realistic also. To the one point, there was a lot of discussion. See, India as a political land today, it's actually made up of 7 countries. Not only political India, but Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Maldives, all this, Sri Lanka, all this collectively make up the earlier cultural land of India. Politically, it is today 7 countries, 8 countries. So that happens every few decades. It happens. Even earlier also, we have had this many kings, but culturally we were all having similar noble ideas. That's what it was. So all these reorganizations is a constant factor we should recognize. It keeps on happening. It's going to further continue to happen. And many more states are going to get reorganized as days go by. There are still quite a few large states that need to get reorganized. So that, because administration is very local, decentralized, because the Indian style is very decentralized, not centralized.
And the more you want to be, the more you need self-reliance and self-sufficiency, the more local you go and the more decentral you become. That is when you can really achieve that goal. So I think eventually we will see more and more such things happening, and it should be taken out of the context of politics, language, and so on.
So development, because that is the thing. And if I may guess, in the next few decades, we may even look at something close to 40 states in India. It could well happen. And while we are all for smaller states, but the way it should be done is without rancor, getting everybody onto the table, understand that, get the message across to the people that it is for your benefit, and make the people appreciate it and the people's representatives to vote for it, because it has to pass as a law, a legal process. So it has to be a combination of all these things. He was a consensus man who could do this, bring everybody, disparate groups onto one discussion room.
Right. So, so coming to our last question, I was talking about his bold decision about the tough time for India while doing a nuclear test against a very big, world power, you can say United States of America. So what is your view on that decision of nuclear test and how he managed all the situation during that time?
Actually, if you look at it, more than the nuclear fallout, the political fallout was bigger. That was a real thing. And if you look at it, see, the offer, what we did after the events is, the scientists of India, including the principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister of India and the whole hierarchy of the senior scientific advisors and the actual scientists, they were ready to have the nuclear test a few years earlier itself. And when they had offered it to the then government to say that, yes, we are ready, you let us know politically when you want, and we'll be ready to do the test in a short notice. So they were sort of technically ready to do it. But obviously for various reasons, the political powers of those times could not literally press the button to say the nuclear, but they could not go ahead with it for various reasons. Let's not get into it. But when the offer was made to the Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, when it came to power, they did not wait. They took the decision to go ahead. They gave, and as you say, to bite the bullet, as you say in the English language, they really bit the bullet and said, yes, let's.
Bomb here, not the bullet.
They had to bite the bomb here and say, go ahead. Of course, earlier, the then Prime Minister Srimati Indira Gandhi, in Pokhran 1, she was able to do it, and she even gave it a code name to that Pokhran 1, calling the Buddha is smiling. Similarly here, so this was the second Pokhran test that was done, wherein, and the more than a nuclear fallout, it's a political fallout that he handled very well, because various countries do. And remember one thing, within a week of India testing its nuclear bombs, Pakistan parallelly tested its nuclear bombs. So they needed to wait for 6 months, 1 year to get themselves ready. That means what? Pakistan was well ready to test immediately, or probably they already had it. But the moment India tested, they tested within a week. That means what? They were parallelly and equally ready is what? So he actually called their bluff. So you are also equally ready. Right. So by agreeing to bite the bomb here, bite the bullet and sort of press the button, he actually called the bluff of Pakistan as well and said, you are also equally ready. So now that became a status quo that created that. Otherwise, it would have been shadow boxing.
Correct.
It would have happened. Shadow boxing. Now both are open. There is no shadow boxing. Everything is in the open. Kula. It came out open. So, and the fallout was what he handled well. As a government, they handled the fallout well and then brought in other sanctions and a whole host of other things happened. And within a couple of years, all those things were removed.
Yes.
To come back to normalcy, and you could enter the high table of the nuclear club. Just a handful of people. So you can enter that club. And of course, there are other clubs to be entered. Every time you have to work towards it because it's part of a process. So you have to have a seat in the high table, in the Committee of Nations, which is what the Indian civilization, being so old, traditional, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, and you must have so you have to take these steps, and you have to every time cross the hurdle, bite the bullet to be on that high table.
Right. So it was a very wonderful discussion with both of you, and you answered every question very well, and it was a very great learning to me as well as to our viewers as well. So thank you, Hariji. Thank you, Hema ji. Namaste.
Thank you, Ankur.
Namaste.
Thank you.